Afternoon, everyone. Ben here, and welcome to our weekly Senate prediction update. And so, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the critiques I got in comments from last week. Remember, some people were a little critical of my decision to move Florida to Rick Scott, and maybe how slow I was responding to Phil Bredesen and Tennessee, and also some critiques in Indiana. And I'll get to Maine because I'm actually going to update. It's one of the updates that I'm doing. And we'll actually go ahead and take care of that. I believe this is the... No. Oh, this one. Okay, so I actually kind of just blanked that Maine is doing ranked choice, and with ranked choice, I honestly don't think most of the Democrats' votes are going to go to Angus King rather than Eric Brackley, and that's going to mean that this should be safe independent, not where I had it is leans independent. I just completely forgot that Maine does a different style of voting, so it was this one. So we'll go ahead and exit that out. We'll talk about the three races that we're actually going to update. Well, which are Indiana, Florida. I'm actually going to update Ohio as well, and we'll talk about North Dakota as well. So there's enough seats here that it could flip control of the Senate. So first state we're going to talk about is Florida. And the newest poll, we're going to only look at the likely voter polls. I don't ever look at registered voter because it's just it's actually less accurate to use registered voters and all adults, but using likely voters, well, okay, I don't ignore registered voter polls. If it's just all voters, then, or not all voters, but all adults, I just immediately tend to not take it as heavily, not factor it in as heavily as I would in other situations, because all adult polls pick up a lot of people who just don't vote and don't even care to vote. Registered and likely voter polls at least get people who are motivated enough to, at the very least, register to vote, and likely voters tend to actually vote. So what we have is the most recent nonpartisan poll shows Rick Scott ahead, margin of error, of course, in both cases. By 2 and 5 points respectively. Partisan poll showing 48 to 46 with Bill Nelson just barely ahead. And then the only other recent poll was from early, and that shows Bill Nelson ahead by 10, and that's a nonpartisan one. But that looks like the outlier rather than the norm, because every other poll from around that period shows Rick Scott ahead to varying degrees. And you have to go all the way back to April to find a poll where Bill Nelson was ahead. So Rick Scott actually does have a lead. So I am actually a little more confident in saying, yes, Florida could be a Republican pickup. I don't think it's out of the question to call it that. And I can understand if anyone has it still leaning to Bill Nelson because he is the incumbent in a year that should be favorable to his party. It's just the polls are showing something different. So if you're going to go based off of polls or based off of historical precedent, you can't really go wrong in choosing, and it's really just a 50-50 call whether or not you're going to call it for Rick Scott or Bill Nelson. But I think there's enough evidence in the polling to indicate that Rick Scott has a slight edge. Next state we're going to talk about, this is Indiana. And a lot of people were criticizing my decision, rightfully so, before anyone says I'm taking this harshly. No, I can actually understand how heavily I was factoring in primary turnout could bias my decision. That said, going to generic polls with the generic Republican, Indiana would favor generic Republican over Joe Donnelly, and the only poll we have indicates Mike Braun should have a very slight edge, and Joe Donnelly is probably the most vulnerable Democrat in the Senate, and I just feel Indiana just doesn't seem like a state where Joe Donnelly could repeat from his win in 2012, which was also a good Democrat year. And it was also a year where he only won by a very small margin over a terrible Republican candidate, similar to Claire McCaskill in Missouri. And that said, she actually has an advantage, I think, over Josh Hawley, mostly due to the drama surrounding the governor's mansion in Missouri. Heidi Heitkamp legitimately won her Senate seat in 2012 by a very, very slim margin, similar to Joe Donnelly. And speaking of, we did get a nonpartisan poll showing Kevin Cramer ahead, again, within the margin of error, but it was from the past week, or about 10 days ago. I may have factored it in already, but it seems like Kevin Cramer is the ideal candidate to take on Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. I think that's a reasonable thing to expect. So now we'll talk about Tennessee, and I've heard some good arguments, and after reviewing polls, I think based off of polling and the general popularity of Phil Bredesen, after all, he was the governor of Tennessee all the way up until I think 2012, and he's still fairly popular down there. I think it's reasonable to say that it could be a Democrat pickup. Unless Marsha Blackburn is able to really advertise and turn out the population of Tennessee. And I'm actually going to change Ohio to likely Democrat from leans Democrat, because the polls show that Sherrod Brown is just thoroughly outclassing Jim Renacci. And so in this one, the Republicans hold on to their 51-49 majority in the Senate. There are a few interesting races. Tester isn't looking as safe against Matt Rosendale as maybe I would have expected, but it's not enough to really talk about other than a cursory glance. Dean Heller versus Jackie Rosen, that's going to be a very close race. And Heller actually has a chance to maintain his seat in the Senate. Kyrsten Sinema is probably going to win against whoever gets nominated. That she will wipe Joe Arpaio off the map. I believe it's Martha McSally is probably the candidate who has the best chance of holding on to Jeff Flake's seat. And Missouri Missouri is interesting, and Josh Hawley can easily win it, but he has to separate himself from the governor's mansion drama. And I think he's actually being hurt by it because a lot of people think he got lucky that he didn't have to make a decision regarding impeachment of Missouri's governor, who, if I remember correctly, had a lot of corruption charges going on. And Ted Cruz is extending his lead over Beto O'Rourke, so there's that. So this is what the map would look like, provided my prediction is correct. Any state with the stripes indicates mixed control. I'm just making sure I've got all this correct. Okay. Yeah, okay, this looks all correct. I'm just looking, 2020. Yeah, a lot of Republican seats will be up in 2020. It may have some pickup opportunities in 2020. Yeah, there's some definite pickup opportunities in 2020. But there are also opportunities to lose seats in 2020, so sorry about that last little bit. I was kind of looking ahead. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Take it easy. Have a nice day.